Hello, everyone just coming in. We're going to start in about 30 seconds here. Welcome to the Summer Opportunities for High School Students webinar with my wonderful panel. I'm so excited to have this conversation. All right, let's just do it. It's 6:03. If they come late, they come late. They'll get a lot out of it anyway. All right. Hi, everyone. So this is such an important topic. We have families all the way from 8th grade families, so rising 9th graders to rising 10th graders, rising 11th graders, and even rising 12th graders here today. I know, so I had so many people reach out and say they're excited about the recording. So, many people will be here today and then others later as well. So let's just give them all this wonderful information. All right, let's start with intros. Oops, sorry about that. There we are, that's the right slide. I'll do a quick intro of myself. So I'm Lisa. I'm the founder of Ivy Tutors Network. We're a New York-based tutoring company. We've been around, this is our 19th school year, hard to believe, and we kind of always try to do things a bit differently. We try to create mentor relationships for the tutor and student, and we instill skills beyond subject matter and test prep, like growth mindset, joy, and learning. That's an important one to me, loving to learn. And some anxiety management. So students are walking away from the process with important life skills, right? So practically speaking, we're the ones who you call for test prep, whether it's high school or SAT and ACT. We do a lot of subject help with APs, and also some college admissions coaching, help with college essays. And we're known for the quality of our tutors. We have a 7-step hiring process, and I would say when people refer us, they always say that we know that you guys have the best team. So I'm pretty proud of that. I'll give the floor to Katie, who's right next to me there.
Hi, welcome. Thank you for coming out tonight, and thank you, Lisa, for inviting me to this panel. Very, very briefly, I an independent consultant. I work under my own company, Catherine Miller Consulting. I work sort of in the intersection between sort of family, education, and advocacy. And I do a lot of work in education and admissions. Specific to the topic we're going to talk about tonight, I work with juniors and seniors on personal statements. And the time I spend in the beginning of the writing process is really in thinking about how to shape and tell their story. And I feel like that's a really relevant topic to what we're talking about today, because the choices that you make about how you spend your summer are what help you figure out how to finesse and shape your story. So I'm really excited to be here tonight, and I'm excited to hear what my colleagues have to say as well.
Awesome, so happy to have you. Lloyd?
Sure, welcome everyone. I'm Lloyd Nimetz and the founder CEO of Spike Lab. Spike is our word for really awesome, ambitious, independent projects that high schoolers do. So we work directly with students in weekly one-on-one coaching. We call it Spike Coaching. And it's a little bit like youth entrepreneurship. We're like a youth entrepreneurship program, but it doesn't have to be businesses. It can be any sort of passion project. And we help students figure out what to do. So there's a bit of self-discovery work, and then launch and really have impact and learn what it takes to execute and plan and inspire and all of that. We've been doing this for 6 years. I'm a serial entrepreneur, so I went to Stanford Business School. I studied entrepreneurship. I started 7 ventures, and I'm also an investor. I invested in 10 companies that IPO'd last year, and I not like through funds, not myself picking all the winners. That would be pretty amazing. And so I'm really deep in the world of helping young people learn that they can do anything if they're intentional about it and they figure out what they're passionate about. So that's me.
Love it, love it. I love Spike Lab. So happy to have you here. All right, and Kevin.
Hi, my name is Kevin Newton. I'm the founder and CEO of An Education Abroad, and As you might have guessed from the name, what I help people do is apply overseas. Whether you're just going to Canada or you're looking for a degree program halfway around the world, we want to help you. We've been at this this is going into our 7th year, and it's just been an exhilarating process watching students who, for whatever reason, thought they were competitive at certain universities here in the US, find out that they can go to places like Oxford or Cambridge overseas. It's one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. I can already tell you I'm probably going to have some different insights than my colleagues. Katie and I were talking about that just before we got started, but I don't have anything against American admissions. I went to William and Mary and was a fraternity social chair and loved every minute of it. But I think that for the right student, going overseas is a great fill. And it's something that I definitely wish I had known about earlier. So again, thank you for being here. And I'm really looking forward to this afternoon.
Awesome. Awesome. We're so happy to have you. And we definitely are seeing a lot of interest in applying abroad recently. So your perspective will be great. Okay, so this is our agenda. We're going to try to get through all of this. So what should you pursue at each grade level? What are the types of summer opportunities? Where can you find the best opportunities? I know that's a question we get asked a lot. Where can students look for jobs and internships? Which summer classes are a good idea? And should you do specific things in the summer to impress colleges? So we'll try to hit on all of that for you guys. The next few slides, I put these up because I know people like to screenshot them. We're going to go through them quickly because we have a lot of things that we want to discuss, a lot of kind of practical advice. But I have a slide for each grade, and this kind of tells you roughly what you should be doing at each grade level. So if this webinar is about the summer, it's hard to believe it's almost May, right? It's about to be summer. So if you're entering the 9th grade, we're recommending reading and to become better at standardized tests and getting excited about high school. But of course, we're going to talk about some other awesome things that you can do to start exploring your passion. As you enter 10th grade, not 6th, 10th grade, we're that explore your passion that I heard that, even in our intros, we heard a lot about already. We're always going to recommend reading and becoming better at standardized tests, but this exploring your passions and interests becomes, even much more important as, you reach that 15 mark, right? In the summer before 11th grade, there's more exploration of passions. This is where those jobs and internships and courses and community service, we'll talk about all of that. And before 12th grade, you've got a lot to do on those college applications, of course, and maybe giving your SAT and ACT a final push. But we're in this webinar going to talk about some other things that you can do that really set you apart. All right. This is such an important thing to keep in mind. So, I think we all know this in the back of our heads, but I just want to scream it that every applicant is unique. And the most important thing you can do is tell your story in your unique way, right? So part of what's amazing about the summer is that you can set yourself apart from the rest of your cohort. So, many high schools, you don't have a lot of choice in the classes you have to take, or you have some choice, but it's certainly not as varied as the amount of choice you have for the summer, right? So you have the summer, you have extracurriculars after school, but that's a lot less time. You've got homework, you've got test prep, all that jazz, sports. The summer is really your time to show and shine and show how you are unique and to really help start to weave that story of what makes you the right candidate. So that's why we're going to be talking about a lot of different things. We're not going to say this is the right path for a 9th grader, this is the right path for a 10th grader. No, it's all about figuring out what it is that you're interested in and then exploring that as a student. So in the types of opportunities, and in the next slide, we'll talk about the various opportunities, but in the types of, in the various opportunities that you have, and again, it's the summer, there's no school, the world's your oyster in a way, right? Certainly, you know, there are, sometimes there are things that are not possible because there's a pandemic or resources or something, but let's just say the world's your oyster. You really want to, oops. Are you guys still seeing my screen? Okay, great. Something popped up on mine, but as long as you're seeing it, I'm good. So let's see. So quality over quantity, not what, but why. So why are you doing these things? Certainly colleges want to see that you are showing initiative, that you're challenging yourself, that you have intellectual curiosity, and that you're exploring your passion. Now, just because colleges want to see these things doesn't mean we're going to rush out and do everything that colleges want us to do. In fact, quite the opposite. Or, you know, I think all of us here can agree that it's so important to pick your activities based on what is of interest to you, and that will lead you to the right college for you. But these are things that are important to explore. Do you guys, does anybody have anything to add? Is this to this slide?
I wanted to jump on the not what, but why. I really like that. And because a lot of people are thinking, like, what do I have to do? What do I have to do? Mm-hmm. Whether it's to boost my profile or, and that's, it's not like that's the wrong question, but what comes first is, in my opinion, in my experience with students, is it's much more powerful if you think about first, like, who are you? What to the slide earlier, like, what's your story? Like, what do you care about? What you care about is sort of the why, if that helps a little bit. Like, and then you figure out what, maybe what you care about is mastery in a certain skill. And that's the why. Like, I really care about getting good at, you know, gymnastics. I want to be an Olympist or whatever it is. And then you go and look for what you can do to pursue that. But the why is, I think, more powerful. And when, from a college admissions optimization perspective, which is not the only reason to do things, but from that perspective, they care about the why, or the inspiration, the reason they want you to be part of their community, their college, is often in the why. And that's where the personal statements and all those essays. So just important to think through.
And Lloyd, I'd love to kind of piggyback on that, if you don't mind, Lisa, because I had actually scribbled down in my notes as you were saying, you know, first thing you do is to write down 10 things you care about. And that's actually what I wrote down. I think what can feel paralyzing to a student and to a family is, okay, what do I want to do? What's my project? What's special about me? And when you start these conversations with kids, a lot of times they're like, no, I don't, you know, there's nothing. Like you got to kind of pull it out. And what's interesting is if you sit down and do that exercise of, you know, 10 things you'd like to do, 5 things you'd like to change, 5 things you care about, what will start to emerge, and this is sort of the way I help think about college essays, is how do the different things you're interested in intersect with each other? Because maybe, for example, you're an avid surfer, but you're also really interested in ecology of the environment. All of a sudden, we're starting to see a story. Okay, what if you went somewhere and you volunteered, but you were also sort of part of like ocean conservation? Like, how does that become a story that's also sort of interesting and a little bit different? So sometimes something that seems, you know, I'm not going to call surfing frivolous because it's awesome, but something that feels like it's not maybe as serious, if you tie it into something you care about, becomes the beginning of a story. So I'm just going to echo what Lloyd said so eloquently, that why, but like it's the intersection of all these different things you're interested in that start to craft the story.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. One of the exercises we always give our students is, what would you wake up at 5 a.m. to do? You know, it's another way of teasing that out of you. Nothing. Katie's like, nothing. Love it. All right. So if we have to put them into buckets, you've got your jobs and internships, You've got your volunteer and community service. There's supplemental education, so showing that intellectual curiosity we talked about in the last slide. Independent projects, it's a great one, a huge category. Pursuing talent, which the last two we're not going to, I think, hit on so much, but they're the other things you can do, right? You can get really good at surfing, or go to a conservatory and practice your violin skills, or theater, be a counselor at a theater camp, or work on your own acting, things like that, right? So that's always an option, and a great one. And then fun is really important. But we're going to go through 1 through 4 today. Katie also mentioned that a lot of these, there's an intersection with some of these in travel opportunities. So we'll try to hit on that as we talk about each section. So the first one is jobs and internships. This is a huge category. One of the things that's important here is that a lot of internships that are kind of more prestigious, or things that you have to apply for, there are deadlines associated with that. So that was why we say now, not later. So the deadlines tend to be between March and May. Some of those deadlines are closing now. So that's if we're talking about these prestigious internships, or special programs for high school students that you have to apply to. I can sort of talk through some of this, and then you guys can chime in. Does that work? All right. So one of the things that we see as being really successful for our students is reaching out to their local businesses. I think high school students and many adults feel shy about this and think, they're not going to answer me. But actually, successful people like talking about themselves. They like being reminded they're successful. They like being told that somebody loves their company so much that they would be an intern. So don't be shy about this. Think about the companies that are your dream companies, industries that are your dream industries. Maybe try to find local startups that are trying to do this. As an owner of a small business, I can tell you that we're always looking for people who are passionate about what we do, and that's a big deal. So we've seen a lot of success with this. Even during the pandemic, this is something that we saw a lot of success with, because it was even easier to get a job at in some ways at like one of your dream companies, even if it wasn't close to home. So all of a sudden opened up the opportunity to say like, oh gosh, I'm really into that what that company is doing in AI, and it's a 3-hour plane ride from me, but now I can do something for them remotely. Does anybody want to chime in about that one? Or you guys just chime in when you want to. I can talk forever.
Sure, I'll be happy to speak to that.
Yeah.
One of the things that's really unique about, and Lisa, I know we've had this conversation before, is what matters and what doesn't when you're applying abroad.
Right.
And most of the students I work with are going to be interested in the UK. So that means the UCAS application.
Because of the language. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's no opportunity to place anything about extracurriculars on your UCAS application. You can talk about them in your personal statement. That'll be something we talk about as we go on. But there is a section for your jobs. So something that the British system is especially interested in are what kind of work you've done. And they want to see that you have real world experience, which does sound a little paradoxical when you look at some of these degrees, especially at places like Oxford or Cambridge, and you have to wait until your second year to study management, for example, at Cambridge. So this is a great chance to stand out. And also, it's the sort of thing that shows in a system that's otherwise very, very focused on academics and your performance in the classroom and on standardized tests. It's an opportunity to show just that you are that multifaceted individual. All the better if you manage to secure a job or internship that is in your realm of interest. A student I'm working with right now wants to work on satellites. And it's not only that it helps to guide your application and help it proceed and frankly look good, but it also helps him make little tweaks. So something he found out through networking, through getting on his LinkedIn, through stuff like that, was that a lot of these satellite companies, especially the ones that he's got the most interest in working with, need electrical engineers. They don't necessarily need another computer science major. They need someone who understands electrical engineering. So that helped him determine exactly which direction he wanted to go. So even if it's just like Lisa said, finding an interest, it can also help just move things along and again, help you stand out.
Yeah, absolutely. I was really into literature and reading when I was a high school student, and then I did an internship for I did an internship 1 year for a literary magazine, a small one, and another year for a literary agent. And they were great. I had wonderful mentors there, but I have to say it helped me realize that that's not an area I want to go into for work. It's an interest that I have. You know, I still read a lot, but you have to, sometimes there's a trial and error to this also, right? So just trying out different jobs and figuring out what courses you want to take in college, that also can be really helpful.
I want to add one more thing, sort of a pitfall I see a lot is that there's this feeling you have to find something and then you sort of grab the first opportunity that comes up. Oh, my friend has a spot in his company, and I can get my kid a place there, and sort of that comes up and you jump on it, and sometimes it's great, sometimes it works out, but I would just caution that, because what often happens is it ends up being very misaligned with the story like we've been talking about, that the student is developing, and it doesn't help all that much. And from a profile building perspective and a very sort of like clear story arc, and also it's not necessarily what the optimal thing. Obviously there's so many things out there, and there's a lot of stress, like I don't know if I can find something, and so it makes sense to jump on opportunities, but it's better to start with like, okay, like we were talking about earlier, what's the story, what are the interests, and trying to seek things that match that as best as possible. But it takes work. I'm aware of how much work that takes.
Totally agree. And that's that quality, not quantity piece, right? Where an internship at a law firm or at a bank, or wherever your parents might work or your parents' friends might work, can seem really great. But if that's not your interest, our time is so precious, right? So if that's not the student's interest, then all of a sudden that's sort of like filling the gaps. It becomes quantity, not quality, even though it's a great internship for somebody else. Yeah.
Lisa, I just wanted to quickly add on the political campaign. For those of you calling in from New York City and any other sort of urban areas, think local. A lot of times when people think political campaign, they're like, oh, who's running for state senate or who's running for president or what? But you can find amazing opportunities to run a grassroots campaign in all of these different areas of politics in New York City or any urban area, really. And it's incredibly interesting to work on a grassroots campaign because you get to actually do work. If you are an intern for like a senator, right? You're not drafting policy papers. You're just not. So, but if you work for a sort of small election within New York, you might be writing their policy on housing. And then you get to really tell a story. So think small.
Yeah, that's gonna be a great college essay.
Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic. Fantastic. We have some examples here. There's so many of these incredible prestigious internships with these March to May deadlines. These are just some examples, depending again on what it is that you'd wake up at 5 a.m. to do, what it is that you think interests you at this time in your life. The New York City Youth Employment Program is really, really interesting. We know a lot of students who've done that. This is an opportunity to work in New York City, for New York City. Look it up, SYEP. There's a stipend, it's a small stipend, I think it's under $1,000 that goes along with that, but you're able to work for one of the city agencies as a high school intern. The other thing we have here is, you know, sort of what Katie was saying earlier about taking a passion or taking two things and combining them. So turning a job like lifeguarding, which you always do every summer, or you know, working at a coffee shop, which maybe you need to do to earn money, and how can you turn that into a project? So we're going to talk about, I think Lloyd's going to talk a lot later about projects, but you know, there's a way to look at everything you're doing as a project. So there's you know, you can do research about, you know, demographic research wherever you are. You can survey people. You can there's a lot of things you can do that to kind of show intellectual curiosity and that you're turning something that's a kind of real money making job into maybe more of an intellectual project. The other two items on here are LinkedIn and resume, and those are just on there as reminders that they are important. So, you know, start a LinkedIn profile. High school students should have a LinkedIn profile with their education on there, and any kind of volunteer work, any organizations they're in, any jobs, any internships, any projects they're doing, that should all be on there. You should be findable. You should have a photo, and that's a good way to LinkedIn is a good place to also start your research on what companies are interesting, who do you follow, who might have interesting content on the topics that are exciting to you. And you know, your LinkedIn is going to be the kind of the beginning. It could go both ways. Your resume could be the beginning of your LinkedIn, and your LinkedIn could be the beginning of your resume. But a resume is really important to have with you know, what you've done so far, and some things that you think might be goals or interests for you, and any skills you have. Some high school students know how to code, or you know, speak several languages. All of that should be on there, and of course that's good for that goes on your college application as well. Tap your network. Lloyd mentioned that sometimes tapping your network leads you kind of a little bit left field to what your interest might be, but not always, especially if you go further. So, you know, maybe you have a friend whose mom's office has some internships, and you're really tempted to take the first one offered because you're flattered and wow, looks really great on paper. But maybe you could ask that mom, hey, I'm actually interested in this. Is there another department at your company that has something that's more in line with my interests? Or maybe you have other friends, maybe you know other people in your network whose companies have internships. So the real important thing here is not to be shy, and to keep reaching out to people on LinkedIn, through your network, local startups, political campaigns. Certainly these prestigious internships are wonderful and prestigious. They're really hard to get, and you're not going to do one every summer, but also keep in mind that there are lots of other students doing exactly that. Whereas if you find something unique from your network, or have this wonderful story about how you reached out to your favorite brand and they hired you as a 16-year-old, that's kind of a better story in a way.
Yeah, I want to share an example of one of our students. He was a little bit cookie cutter, if you will, as a sort of student profile, great guy. And he was really into product design and sort of art. And he got a summer job in a local pizza joint, and it was awesome. Like, he loved it. He learned how to make up pizza, and it was a great experience on so many levels for him. But it wasn't obviously story aligned, and he didn't have an interest in pizzas, for example, and
Right.
and anything like that. But it was a great, like, he learned a lot just about the hard skills of what it takes to do a job.
Mm.
And it was a humbling thing, and he ended up writing an incredible personal statement around, like, just making a pizza pie. And it was just really well written, and it got to his humor, it got to his work ethic, it really showed him as like a grounded guy, not a sort of privilege. He went to a private school. Like, he came across wonderful, and he got into Northeastern, which this year had a 7% acceptance rate, and was really one of his favorite schools. So, things like that can really help, and are great experiences too.
Love it. Thanks for sharing that. So the next thing is volunteering and service. This is an interesting one, and I'd love to get everybody's input on this one. Now, when I was applying to college, volunteering and service was really, really important, and it was one of the boxes you had to check. Now, certainly, I think it's still incredibly important that we are all good, members of the community, and that students are using any spare, some spare time, allocation of spare time to be good members of the community. But how important is this now? How do volunteer and service opportunities compare to internships and jobs, for example?
I mean, I'll just speak very briefly on it. It certainly is still really important to demonstrate a sort of a social justice or community service interest at the good human point to colleges. A lot of them really do care about being good humans. I think that it is important not to just volunteer for volunteering's sake. I think a lot of people kind of check that box. They say, oh, I need community service hours. I'm going to work in a soup kitchen. I'm going to do this. But it's even better if you can find something that really resonates with what you care about outside that. So maybe food scarcity is something that you think about. Maybe and so a soup kitchen would make sense. Maybe you are a dancer. I'm just thinking about my daughter, for example, and there's a lot of amazing camps that are free throughout the city where you could volunteer as a counselor. That makes more sense, right? It makes more sense with the story. I think that it is important to balance as you move through freshman to senior year, to balance the experiences that are going to, have a lot of bang for their buck, the big name stuff, with the experiences that are going to continue to teach you about what you want to do going forward, and that are going to teach other people about who you are, that story piece. So I don't really I think if you had a student who just did volunteer stuff all the way through, but it told a story, that would be just as compelling as someone who had an internship at Google. I think when I talk to friends of mine who do college admissions, what I'm hearing is they want to see it make sense. They just don't want to see a list, a list of different things that people have done. They want to see a trajectory, and they want to understand the why, kind of going back to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. So don't just check the box, have it make sense with a story.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit, I can't agree more. There's so many people doing volunteer things because they feel like they have to, and then later they're like, I can't believe it, none of this mattered. I didn't even put it on my application, or it hurt my application because it created a noisy confusion.
Just detracted from the story. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's wonderful work. And I agree, find something you care about and follow that. There's so many great organizations and causes, and there's definitely something you care about that will strengthen, and just make sure it's authentic and for the right reasons.
Yeah.
So I get to be a bit more blunt than my colleagues here. It doesn't matter. volunteering and community service with a handful of exceptions. For example, if you want to work in international development and want to be able to talk about having seen the need for economic development in your personal statement, which again, for the UK, you get one personal statement for all 5 programs you apply to, and you've got to weigh, do you really want to use that many of your 650 words for that? So I definitely encourage people to go out and find something they're passionate about, just to step away from the college application process and find some meaning, because this process, as we all know, can be a tough one. And it's good to have some sort of external motivation to do stuff outside of it. But if you don't have to do, I feel like a horrible person saying this, but you don't have to do any community service or have any volunteer experience to be successful applying overseas.
Right.
And a lot of schools are behind a little on this, and they have requirements, and
High schools have the requirements, even though colleges are not asking for that anymore. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, they want the good person thing, but they don't necessarily, it's not a check the box, 100 hours, etc. credits. So if your school does require it, or there are other sort of things like you feel like you have to, I definitely encourage align it again with find things that reinforce things you care about. So if you're really into animals, that's a big thing for you, then animal shelters make sense. So if you have to do it, try to, I'll be talking about projects. Like there are a lot of credits you can get you can do a project that then the credit, it has a cause rooted in the project. And so you can actually get credit for that without having to do 100 extra hours of something else. So think about being efficient.
Yeah, great call. We have on here these service trips. So there are these some people call them teen tours. There are these wonderful world trips that you pay to participate in as a high school student, and some of them have a really wonderful service component. So maybe you're helping to build a school in South America, or you're providing some kind of delivering medical supplies in Africa or something like that, and that's another option. We have an interesting question, which I'm sure we all get a lot in the chat, about how that does that kind of just look to colleges like this is a privileged student and it doesn't matter, or is this something that we should still keep in mind?
It's a good question. I saw it in the chat and I was like, ooh, I don't know if I want to touch that one. I mean, I think it depends on what you do with it. We're going to be a broken record, I think, today about being super intentional in what you do. If you just go abroad and build a school or do something, and that doesn't make sense with anything else that you're doing, then yeah, it looks a little bit like you've checked that box, privileged parents paying for this trip abroad. But if what you're doing actually makes sense from a sort of trajectory of what you're interested in, and if it teaches you something about maybe what you want to do next, what classes you take the next year, so again, it becomes part of the story, then I think that decreases that sort of potential, like, oh, it doesn't matter, that's just pay to play. So, at the risk of talking about my children, I'm just going to give one anecdote. My son is a senior in high school, and he has done 2 CIEE, Council for International Educational Exchange trips. And first of all, they offer amazing merit aid. So a lot of kids actually do go for free, which is lovely. But he did a, walking in the footsteps of Mandela trip in South Africa after his freshman year. Deep interest in sort of politics and social justice. But if it had just sat there in his story and hadn't led to anything, it would have just been like, oh, look what mom paid for. Instead, he sort of took that, ended up co-founding an organization for like a New York student charter of a larger organization that helps families impacted by HIV and AIDS in South Africa, then chose classes based on this idea of sort of development and not-for-profit work, and then used kind of what he learned to speak about kind of urban development in some of the campaigns that he did with other people later on. So it sounded a little privileged, but as part of a story, it was really impactful. So I think that's the key. I know that's sort of a long answer to the question, but again, if it's done intentional and it becomes part of a story, it can be very, very, very important, both for the student and for their perceived value to the college.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, Lloyd.
Oh yeah, there's another question, just follow up on this question of, privilege and paying for research. I would say in general, it's okay to pay for things, as long as everything that Katie just says, as long as it is in service of authentic growth and passion, which is not always easy to find. And that's a journey to find that passion. And not everything is going to lead to it, because we try things and some of those will end up not being, center points. You might not even mention some of the things you try that didn't lead to that longer narrative arc that you focus on, but some will. And the ones that do it's okay to pay for it. Obviously the free ones that are really selective are, a little more impressive, but all of them are great as long as they're, again, in service of something that genuinely is they're interested in, because they want that curiosity, they want that passion, and they want to see that you've pursued it. And so the things that you're doing, I always think of them as evidence of the bigger story. So if you are writing down and you're telling schools, I care about this, they're asking in their heads, prove it, show me the evidence. And the evidence is that you've done all these things and you've thrown yourself in, and that's what you want to be sort of looking for. That's why the why comes before the what.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Just want to bring everyone's attention to this Doing Good Together link. We're gonna provide a slide with resources, and I'll drop them in the chat later also. But Doing Good Together is a great site that is a roundup of volunteer opportunities every month. Thanks, Katie, for giving us that tip. Okay, another important topic, supplemental education. And there are so many ways to do this, right? It hits upon some of the same things we were just talking about. You can pay a lot of money to do these really wonderful pre-college programs at top universities. You can live there, you can have a really interesting college experience, or almost like college experience, and take college courses. And then you can also take courses at your local community college in New York. There's a program called College Now. I'll give a link to everyone later of the College Now courses that are still accepting applications for this summer. And so that's free. And then there's a lot in between. So showing intellectual curiosity, as we have said, is really important. It's important to your college application, and I think it's also important in figuring out what you're passionate about, what and kind of what direction you want to go in your studies and in your career. Some schools don't offer high-level classes in your areas of interests. This is the summer is an opportunity to take some of those classes. Maybe your school doesn't have enough computer science, enough coding, enough engineering. Maybe it's really impossible to get into that calculus class as a junior. There are lots of scenarios where you can take the summer to do supplemental education and have a lot of development for yourself and for your college application as a result. Again, this list is not it's not at all comprehensive. These are some ideas of programs that we've seen our students do really well in. There'll be some links at the end where with some more comprehensive lists. But you know, there's a debate program, there's sports management, just to show you the real breadth. We see lots of students doing kind of mini pre-med, mini med programs to get deeper into biology and different kinds of medical sciences. Most schools don't offer any, you know, anything besides just a regular bio and maybe an AP bio or IB bio course or something like that. If you're really into languages, obviously Middlebury is really wonderful for that. If there's more of a resource issue, in other words, you don't want to pay for these very expensive programs, there's Coursera and edX, and those are generally asynchronous and more self-study, but you can really get a lot out of it. And again, like everybody's been saying, if you take it seriously and if it leads to something bigger and leads to, you know, it's part of the snowball effect of you finding the big thing that you're interested in. Starting with Coursera and edX are great. Summer Discovery is a program that includes a number of campuses around the U.S., UCLA, and some out east. Also, these are programs where you go and you live at the college and you take you take courses. College Now, we discussed, that is the courses that are open and at local community colleges to high school students. Those are actually available during the school year as well. I'll give you guys a link to this later, but there's a new thing, and this is this University of Pittsburgh accredited classes line. This is relatively new. There's a new program where you can take online courses that are accredited, so you get college credit for $400 a class, and I'll give you guys a link to that. I'm hearing incredible things about this particular, their curricula in particular. And then again, in the last 2 bullet points here, I'm just going to urge everyone to not be shy, to get out of your shell, to reach out to local professors who are doing interesting work. Every year we have students who are able to talk their way into helping a professor at a local research university with some aspect of their project, even if it's administrative, but you're involved in this big team that's doing some really exciting research. And then, of course, there are other ways to get education. You know, if you're looking to better your language skills, as the example we have here, you might opt to kind of do a conversation exchange with somebody who's learning English, and they might teach you Spanish. So that's still showing intellectual curiosity, and that you're looking for a challenge and you're looking to better yourself, and can be part of a really exciting story.
Lisa, I wanted to just throw Kevin into this because I saw in the chat that one of the people on the call asked a very smart question about what to do about preparing for AP tests when your school doesn't offer them if we're thinking about studying abroad. And I'd actually be curious myself to hear from Kevin about how students are preparing for UK admissions now that the subject tests have gone away if their school does not offer APs, because it is an interesting quandary.
It is one that when the subject test decision came out, I lost more of my already thinning hair. So the short answer is you can still register for the tests without taking the course. And this is actually a great segue into some of the thoughts I had on this slide.
The AP tests, you can still register
tests,
for.
yes.
Yeah, the SAT subject tests are gone and forgotten.
They're gone.
Yeah.
Is that probably the greatest way to stand out to an international university is self-study, because it shows motivation. It shows that you're deeply interested in something. I'll talk more about this later, but kind of the underlying philosophy is just to keep in mind and to help filter whenever I say something that sounds crazy compared to my colleagues, keep this in mind. American universities look for very interesting people who are very intelligent. Overseas universities, especially in the UK, look for smart people because smart people are interesting. So at least that's what I tell myself. So self-study is an amazing thing to do. I had a student who, because of the pandemic and because of other things, couldn't afford a lot of these programs. So he wanted to study physics and he wanted to go to Cambridge. So he started reading physics textbooks, and his personal statement was talking about grappling with quantum physics books and saying, you know, admittedly, I only got through the first 2 chapters, and Cambridge ate it up. They loved him. He was admitted early. I can also speak to the University of Pittsburgh courses. I've got a number of students using them right now, and they love them, especially if your students decided that maybe they want to get ahead on calculus and be able to take that Calc BC exam at the end of senior year so they can go for engineering or physics or something like that. It's a great way of getting ahead.
Yeah, that's where we're recommending it too, where you want to kind of slide a little bit faster ahead than your school allows you.
Exactly. Or I've also got a student who's looking at, this is going to sound crazy, she doesn't like the AP statistics teacher at her school. They just don't get along. And she feels she's got a better chance of taking the Coursera, or excuse me, not the Coursera, but the Outlier course.
Outlier. Yep. The University of Pittsburgh accredited classes, that's called Outlier. I'll put that link in the chat for everyone.
She feels she's got a much better shot of doing well and being able to pass the AP statistics class with the Outlier course than she does with the teacher just down the hall. Now, something Lisa and I were talking about earlier today was there's obviously a lot of interest in these pre-college programs in places like Oxford and Cambridge. And there's something different with a number of these overseas, is that they're typically licensed programs. So they don't have a firm connection to the university. They may hire teaching staff who happen to be postdocs or something like that. But writing about them in your personal statement isn't going to get you anywhere. Where these have a huge benefit for students is being able to talk about, especially as Americans going abroad, I really enjoyed being overseas because of XYZ culturally. It's not the kind of thing that's going to make or break an application, but it is the kind of thing that will help nudge an application more towards the right direction. So definitely, for going overseas, that's a lot to be weighed. And I'll let my colleagues speak about their purpose here in the US because I'm pretty sure it's probably quite different.
Yeah, I would add, just this is one of my favorite topics right now. I think we're in the most incredible moment for learning because you can just access the best professors, the best experts teaching almost anything for almost no money. And it is incredible for the curious person. And of course, that's what colleges want. They want curiosity. They want it to be infectious. That's what they want the culture of their campus to be. So they're looking for that. And one of the downsides is that now it's so easy that almost all of the applicants that they're accepting are showing that curiosity through going above and beyond what their school has to offer. Because I use the analogy of airport food. Like if you only have airport food and you can go to all these other restaurants, like you want choice, right? And so now there's so much more choice. And if you are curious, you're going to be shopping around more and discerning about that. And so it doesn't have to be the accreditation necessarily, but if you have an intellectual area that you're passionate about, or like a lot of our students are doing spikes, like these projects that are not necessarily academic, but there's an academic dimension, which I can talk about later. And you always want to try to incorporate an academic dimension and show that you're not just saying you're interested, but you're pursuing that through some classes so that's important and you can do that over the summer or during the school.
Yeah. I have another, I'm thinking of another, when we talk about all these things, I'm sure for all of us, like just kind of like rivers of different students come up. We all have so many memories of wonderful students that we've worked with who did all, incredible self-study or research or independent projects. I'm thinking of a student who was one of the was the first person under 18 to be certified for Passive House, which is an architectural certification that is is one of the top, sorry, I'm going to butcher this, top certifications for having like the most eco-friendly house, right, is one way to put it. So so he obviously has a huge interest in architecture and went ahead and studied, on how to be an inspector for Passive House and how to kind of consult with people building homes or doing renovations on homes on, how to make their house more eco-friendly. So world's your oyster, right? I mean, if you have an interest in architecture and the environment, there's a way to marry those two through education. You just have to be creative. Okay, of course, we're over time as usual, but this is in some ways the most important part. And we've touched a bit on independent projects. I feel like every time we say, well, this marries two things, or this was a creative way to show this kind of interest, right? We're taking an education experience or a travel experience or a volunteer experience and turning it into something more unique for that student. Just seeing that it's 6:59, we obviously are not going to finish quite yet. We're going to be a little bit late, but I'll let Lloyd start on this slide.
I was worried about time. I'm never going to do it in 1 minute, but
No, please don't. Please
let
don't.
me know if you want me to sort of, cut early. But I'll just give you some stories. Like, obviously, it's self-explanatory. There are lots of projects you can do. And it's all about everything we talked about, like finding that passion, a sense of purpose. I prefer the word purpose, actually, because it's more rooted in caring, and it's a more serious, and is a little more external driven, like it's about impacting others and serving. And so, but finding that thing and then finding a project to bring into the world, we focus on helping them launch these things. And I know it's hard, and start small is one of our things. Like, don't you hear, like, the stories I'm going to tell are kind of ambitious, but they always start small and then they snowball, and sometimes they don't work and you switch, and that's okay. As part of the process of learning how to make things happen. And we all know not everything's going to work out. And so, starting a student club is one of the most common, but there's a proliferation of that. And so just be cautious of doing that just to do it. You want to sort of put your time to something you really care about, but sometimes it's the right way to do. We had a student who was really into sustainability and engineering and all these things that are pretty common. And he delved into those spaces, and we helped him sort of look at different things that were out there. And he really got excited about a space that's called biomimicry, which is the idea of engineering and discovering inventions and concepts inspired by nature. So nature is actually way ahead of us in terms of technology. And so biomimicry, he got really into that, and he created a student club around biomimicry. But then he went beyond that and created a national competition in his country. He was not in the United States. So he copied sort of the biomimicry youth competition that exists in the United States, which I didn't know it existed, but it exists. It's like 5 years old, and he copied it for his country and was able to roll it out and do something pretty cool. So it started with the club, and then it snowballed into something beyond that the club played a big role in making happen.
I love that tip about maybe looking outside the country for what are other people doing that we haven't done here yet, and starting that here.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't have to create the next unicorn that, like you can copy things that are out there and do it locally with your own twist. It's
Mhm.
really a great way to go. Again, as long as it's rooted in something you're excited about. I also like the example, the intersection of interest that Katie mentioned, so important. We do that all the time with our students to try to come up with something that's a little more unique, a little more interesting, and often at the intersection, really exciting things can happen. I want to give you a little example of that. We had a student who was great. I love her, she's amazing, but she didn't have that much that was very impressive. She was, pretty good student, not top of her class. And she was really into cosplay. And for those of you who don't know, cosplay is like this sort of hobby where you dress up in costume, you create a costume of like an anime character or different characters, and it sort of has a whole world. You go to conferences and you put up makeup. And we were like, okay, that's your thing. Not sure what to do with that. And so what ended up happening was she was also a child of a single mom. And that was a big part of who she was, obviously. But she never thought of that as important in any way. She ended up looking at the intersection, to make a long story a little shorter, between that personal attribute that was very personal. It wasn't an interest, but it was something that defined her in a major way that was very important to her, which made it meaningful and couldn't go. And so look for the personal attributes, not just the cross-section of interest. And she crossed that with her interest in cosplay. And what she did was she went out and an interest in photography. And she went out and she interviewed other children of single parents, which she was like so excited to do, to sort of learn about how other people experience that, because it's sort of taboo and no one talks about it, and alternative forms of family. And she just got into that and did what ended up, she didn't even realize, is the whole field of anthropology, where she went out and did sort of anthropological sort of interviews, and from that developed this composite character where she did self-portraiture work and developed a photography exhibit that then she exhibited in these pop-up exhibits. She rented out like an Airbnb, and a free makerspace gave her some space, and she marketed it. So she didn't just put it up in her school. She didn't just wait for some gallery to sort of give her a slot like a year from now. She hustled to get it out there. And she ended up not just showing the work, but doing sort of a conversations around the themes of her work. And she did like 4 of these. She ended up probably a total of like 200, 300 people came to them. So we're not talking about huge scale, but
that's still impressive.
And yeah, it was so cool. And
impressive.
And someone covered it in a news article, and so it ended up getting out there a little bit. And that was a big part of her story. And her college counselor didn't think she had a shot at all these colleges. She ended up getting into Dartmouth and Northwestern. And literally the letter that they sent mentioned how interested they were in that. So
I love when that happens, when they mention the independent project. Yeah.
So never underestimate what you can do. Everyone has passions and interests that derive from who they are and personal attributes. So look to that. Don't just look to the major and like, oh, it has to be coding, or look at who they are now and what they care about.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I'm thinking of another student we have this year who is really into sailing, and he started a sailing school for little kids near his home. And if you think about all these stories that we're telling, when you start something big or small, when you start something, you learn so much about the thing that you love So you learn so much about sailing and teaching it, but you also learn a lot of other skills, and you learn about yourself. You know, what is it in starting a sailing school that you'd like? Maybe you realize that you are actually a really good marketer, or you realize that you don't like the finance portion, or you love the finance portion, and then you get more motivated to maybe take AP, you know, microeconomics at school. So these projects just have in helping students pursue a passion, or pursue several passions and find their intersection, just has, you know, so many legs, right? It's certainly not all about college at all. I think it's about self, you know, passion and self-development, right? Developing yourself.
Absolutely. I mean, the skills you learn are for life, and we all know that in today's world, you have to go out and hustle and make things happen, and this shows that. It also shows that they're going to hustle at school, that they have energy, and it shows also a humility and an ability to, like, you're not just riding on a school. You know, if you're in a good school, you're not just following what you're told. You're going to go out and make things happen, question things, start clubs, and that's what these colleges want. They want campuses that are vibrant. They want students who are going to go out and make things happen, run clubs, and so that's obviously what they're looking for. And it's a good way for them to know that the student's going to do it at their campus because they're already doing it in high school.
Yeah, yeah. So on the college side of things, right, it might feel like there's this, like the college is the bachelorette and there are so many applicants, but when you take your summer activities to the next level, you know, we're going to flip the script. And, you know, I think that unique applicants that do this kind of self-development work are really thoughtful about what they do in the summer, even if there's a bit of trial and error, that there's an arc and a story. It really flips the script, and you become an applicant that everybody's excited to read their application. All right. Well, you guys, it's only 7:09. I think we've done great. I am going to, let's see, one thing I can do is put some of these links into the chat here. This is College Now classes that are available. And in the meantime, we could take a few more questions if anybody still has questions. There's still a lot of people on here. We have a raised hand. 1 second. Oops, that totally disappeared for me. Is Marion, who had a question. Marion, I don't see how to call on you right now. I'm working on it. But if you can type the question either in the chat or the Q&A, that would be great. Oh, she says no question. That was an accident. Okay. All right, great. Do you guys see any open questions in there in the chat? Or did we did a really great job at answering them as we were going. Will you email us the recording? Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, that's unique. Usually we end and like there's a million questions in here. I love it that we got through them during the webinar. Love it, love it. I'm so grateful to my brilliant panel here. You guys are amazing. Thank you for all your insight and for all the examples and the the case studies, sharing, some of your past, what some of your past students did. We will send out this webinar and your information as well. But if you would like to reach out to Spike Lab to learn more about Spike Lab, that's at the bottom of the screen here. Spike Lab is Lloyd's company that works on independent projects with students, and Education Abroad is Kevin's company that will help you figure out how to apply to colleges abroad and have a whole different amazing experience. I will send info for me and Katie as well in a follow-up email. Let's see. Outward Bound, programs like Outward Bound, are these kinds of programs interesting or too expected? Does anybody have thoughts on that before we run?
So Outward Bound is one of my favorite organizations in the whole world. I still donate to it, and it changed my life. So it's not necessarily from an impressiveness. It's not going to rock any college's world, but it is really, really powerful as a program in terms of like just for me personally, I was a low confident kid and kind of insecure in it. Getting out in the wilderness and follow some of the exercises and the things they do, it just helped me sort of step into who I was and do it in nature. And we've all been sort of stuck indoors on screens, like now more than ever, that it's even more valuable to get away from screens and magic can kind of happen. And so it's just a wonderful program, but there are others out there too. It's not the only one.
Great. I'm trying to get some of these links in this chat. All right, guys. Well, thank you so very much. This has been wonderful. We're getting lots of comments about how helpful it was. Thank you so much. We look forward to keeping in touch with everybody who was here and everyone who signed up for the webinars and is going to watch it later. This has been great. I love all your insights, and let's do it again soon.
Thanks again for having us, Lisa.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
Everyone.